what if the scraps and screw-ups of our careers is where the real seeds of possibility lie?
In our podcast, A Life Worth Working, we offer up an extra shit pile episode where messy moments fertilize remarkable futures. Rather than highlighting the shining milestones of success, we dig into the raw, unfiltered stories behind career and personal transformation.
Here's street psychiatrist Katie Coe and her contribution to the shit pile.
Katie, we often use a metaphor with our podcast, A Life Worth Working, where we talk about the manure of life, the shitty, hard things, and how they can become compost and fertilizer for new things to grow. Mm-hmm. So I'm curious if you reflect on in your career, if you have had a shitty experience that from that you've experienced growth or you've seen growth in others.
Mm-hmm. Such a wonderful question. Thank you for asking. I think there's a number of things I could point to, but what jumps to mind is essentially the first 5 years of my career, just adjusting to this job and adjusting to having a career while raising children, growing my family. I started this job in 2018, so 7 years ago, and I've always loved it. And I always wanted to do street psychiatry in addition to other things like teaching and research. But it became to a point where, although I loved what I was doing big picture wise, day to day, things felt incredibly stressful. And it often felt like I was drowning because not only was I doing the street psychiatry, but I was also trying to do research. I was trying to teach. I had a non-homeless clinical practice as well. And I was growing a family. In addition to that, the way that street psychiatry is practiced is very different than how I was trained, as mentioned, in residency and throughout my medical training to, make these quick assessments of people and be very kind of rigorous and even rigid sometimes in the way that I approach the work. And so having to learn to kind of take a more long-term approach and think about boundaries differently, think about creative, non-traditional ways to connect with patients that oftentimes I think would be looked down upon, in the way that I was trained. That was very hard. And then just learning about life as a professional. So an example that comes to mind, I don't know if this is too specific, but I just think that one thing I realized I struggled with was speaking up in meeting settings. So for some reason, when I was a resident, I had didactics, teaching, but all of a sudden when you're out in the real world, I feel like there's so many more meetings, at least in academic medicine. And I had that feeling of my heart pounding right before I spoke every time. And I would always get in my own head about whether I should make this comment or not. And I really realized this was something that, I had a weakness in that I needed to work on. Over time, I pushed myself to speak even though it felt uncomfortable. And I think it's better now. It's still not, completely natural for me, but I bring that example up because that's something I didn't even realize until I started my career. And being able to learn new dimensions of yourself, learn new things that you have to work on can be very humbling. And so I feel like I was struggling with all of those different things in the first 5 years out of residency. And I've since made some changes in my schedule. I'm no longer doing the non-homeless clinical practice. I'm focusing a little bit more on research on homelessness, which has been wonderful and helped kind of given me more breathing room. And so I do feel like I'm now in a place where I can enjoy life day to day, but it took time to get there. And I'm very grateful to have gone through that experience to realize that kind of you do have the power to some extent at least. And I was fortunate to be able to do it within my work to make your schedule more what you want it to be and to become the professional you want to be with the right support. I'm thankful to have had mentors and who supported me through this, and my wonderful husband too who made this possible.
Thank you so much.
It's interesting. What you're describing is kind of like a beautiful sort of intellectual humility where you went through med school, you went through your residency, you're being trained in a certain way, and then you kind of have to undo a lot of your assumptions about how you engage with patients. And yeah, I just think that's a great lesson for a lot of us I wonder if it felt hard to feel inexpert, like INEXPERT.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. It did. And it still does. I still feel like I'm learning every day. I still feel like I'm undoing or learning again about what I was taught in residency and had to think about it in a different way, like in terms of prescribing medications and, seeing patients for walk-in appointments. Like I was trained in residency, if a patient comes late multiple times in a row or missed multiple appointments, you talk about terminating them from the clinic. And that does not work in this population when people have a substance use and have challenges with executive functioning. And we really try and see patients for walk-in appointments. And even if it's just a 5-minute visit, that's better than nothing. And I think prior to that, I had this mindset, no, I have to see a patient for a full hour. I need to get the whole history, make sure I don't miss any information, or else that's not being a good doctor. But I've really been humbled and realized that that's not the most effective approach for this population when it's so much about engagement initially and just building that alliance and trusting that over time you'll get the clinical information that you need.
Hmm. I also love that metaphor of the long walk and realizing the pacing of this work is different. And you had to then realize that your own embodied pacing was going to have to honor your needs too. So it's beautiful, that alignment of your inner and outer world.
Yeah, thank you for saying that, Dana. That's a wonderful way to think about it.
Special thanks to Katie Coe for this bonus episode on how the manure of life can often lead to remarkable futures.
Please don't forget to listen to her longer episode on A Life Worth Working.
And please subscribe to our podcast, sprinkle it with all the stars, and please share with your loved ones and friends who may also be searching for more meaning and purpose in their lives and work.